first up, I have Konstantin van der Groben, co-founder and managing director of Demican, certainly one of Europe's leading players. Matt Darren, CEO of Curaleaf. Laurie Holcomb, CEO of Gold Flora, and finally Darren Weiss, president of Verano. And yeah, it's been a long day for me. I actually rolled onto my panel this morning straight from the airport in a baseball hat and a sweatshirt. So, not that I didn't mean to fully, no disrespect to my panel this morning, but I needed to dress up for this established international audience. And it's obviously an incredibly exciting time. It's a very complicated time internationally in the world, right? It's a pretty interesting backdrop to be having this conversation at a time when I'm going to go on CNBC in an hour and do my daily show, and we're probably going to spend the first 20 minutes talking about the world, interest rates, the impact of what's going on in the Middle East, and to the extent that there's an impact on global markets, what the headwinds might be for growth. The flip side is that in the cannabis sector, there's really an incredibly exciting backdrop for growth. Despite the fact that, again, if you think about the world we live in, all we hear about is kind of, onshoring, nearshoring, kind of xenophobia, people bringing everything back home. Cannabis is a global industry. Everybody on this stage is not only well aware, but involved in the global cannabis economy. And I think hopefully today's conversation is one where we're going to try to talk about, first of all, the size of the market, what markets are most important. Obviously, evolution in Germany, obviously evolution as it relates to where we're seeing some disruption already in terms of traditional CPG. This team is really well suited to have this conversation. So quickly, just why don't we go from left to right here, at least my left to right, and Konstantin, just two minutes real quick hello, and then I'll get it moving.
Sure. Hi, my name is Konstantin van der Groben. I'm founder managing director of Demican. We're the first German cultivator of medical cannabis. Right now, I guess, one of the leading medical cannabis platforms in Germany, and absolutely excited about the recent developments in Germany.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt Darren, CEO of Curaleaf, global cannabis company based here in the U.S. With a major presence in Europe and growing.
Thanks. Laurie.
Laurie Holcomb, founder and CEO of Gold Flora, a vertically integrated cannabis operator in California.
And Darren Weiss, president of Verano Holdings. We are a cultivator, distributor, and retailer of cannabis products across the United States in 13 markets, including here in Florida. And happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So maybe, Konstantin, let's talk about Germany. It does seem to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, well, my view on Germany 6 months ago was a very different outcome. So were you surprised by at least the rapidity of the legislative dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, so first off, we're so happy that there's finally some good news coming from Germany. April 1st, legalization happened in Germany. So all the buzz, all this rumors, no, it's actually real. We've reached a tipping point, I think. There's no stepping back from legalization. But yes, Tim, it was a stressful time. We expected it way earlier. We expected it last November, then last December, then February, and then not anymore, to be quite honest. But then it has happened, and now Germany is a market of 84 million people, one of the largest economies worldwide, and probably going to be a role model for other European countries. So I think this is exciting for Germany, for Europe, and hopefully also for the US.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly our expectations of how rapidly Europe may be transformed, and obviously Germany has often been the economic leader across. Any sense on the margin profile as it evolves through into kind of the fully federalized market? Obviously, Germany is known for being a pharma-heavy market. Obviously, there's a lot of benefits to that from a margin perspective. There's also, possibly significantly more regulation and call it fragmentation in that.
Well, I would say yes, we are more pharmaceutical oriented, and when we talk about cannabis in Europe and in Germany, it's mostly from a medical perspective, but that regards the quality of the product and the regulatory requirements. So very, very high entry barriers to get into the market. But once you are in, once you've understood the regulations, the EU GMP regulation, it is really a federal, I would say it's a European, maybe even a global market. I was just in Mexico before, I was in Colombia before. We have customers that deliver product to Germany. 90% of German cannabis is imported. So once you go this very highly regulated pharmaceutical route, it opens up a global trade.
Matt, it seems almost like Curaleaf decided to time their announcement of NGC with what was going on in Europe. Talk about your recent acquisition. Talk about, though, the vision, and a vision that I think probably applies to a lot of the core U.S. players, which was that obviously Europe was an important market. I know Boris Jordan from another life, the chairman of Curaleaf, and he's an international guy. He's a guy that spent a lot of time doing deals in Europe, and so it doesn't surprise me that Curaleaf has been there.
Yeah, so look, we made a move into Europe 3 years ago with the original acquisition. It's really become a core focus. I think in the U.S. here we have a very myopic view that somehow the entire industry revolves around the United States, and in fact, what's taken place is really a global phenomenon where you have a global supply chain and the ability to ultimately scale brands throughout the world now, which we think is incredibly exciting and maybe the most powerful opportunity in the entire space. So yeah, we can, unlike the U.S. with the state-by-state dynamics and having to build mini supply chains within each state, there's an incredible opportunity internationally to scale that globally and to be able to import and export cannabis really throughout Europe and the world now. So we have a primary campus that we're manufacturing out of Portugal, which we think is a great spot to be growing and processing in Europe. But we recently announced an acquisition of a great part of our supply chain in Canada, Northern Green, that we've been doing a lot of work with over the last several years and supplying us into Germany and now new markets in Poland, et cetera. So, the international opportunity, I think, has a lot of benefits that we've not seen in the U.S. Hopefully, we will see some of those over time.
Like what? I mean, so I get that asset heavy is possibly something that's required in the U.S. and that, as you talked about, distribution alone is such a fascinating business. But just what do you see as different and obviously on some level in terms of a capital allocation perspective more interesting?
Yeah, so one of the big ones is they do not have something called 280E in Europe. So this punitive tax that we've all been paying in the U.S. Is not a thing in Europe. So that obviously creates a lot of additional cash flow for companies operating there. I think the ability to build a more singular supply chain where you can centrally grow and process and manufacture and then distribute out of a single point through many different countries and many different markets is just completely different than what we faced here in the United States, and that has a huge impact on margins and ability to scale up. And I think the other piece is the regulatory environment is much different. The barriers to entry, in Germany, for example, it takes a year to register a single strain. The environment, I compare a lot to what the U.S. felt like, 6 or 7 years ago, early stage medical markets. It has a lot of similarities to that. But, the barriers for, those that are already established in the markets, it's not going to be easy to scale up for others.
Darren's obviously getting a call about probably somebody from Stade right now talking about no. Lori, while Darren takes that call, you sit in California. You have a global view. Obviously, it's hard not to have a global strategy around cannabis, but there's also you sit in the 5th largest economy of the world in California, and you've got some pretty interesting stats. But Lori wowed me into pointing out that cannabis is now bigger than the almond industry. And I mean, I'm sure everyone here is doing like almond milk in their Starbucks these days. So it says something. So give us the perspective. You're arguably sitting in the most sophisticated cannabis economy in the world and have been in the center of that for a long time. Your perspective on the globe and your opportunities, obviously there's so much to do, especially brand building and generating the business that you've already built so well.
Yeah, so I'd say this, everyone here that understands cannabis, we are literally in a knife fight in California. That's the way I like to describe it. I was talking to Constantine earlier, and California's been a medical market since 1998, so we've been at it a very long time. And we are about I think you said, the 5th largest GDP in terms of...
Bigger than the UK, bigger than India. So, no, I mean, and California is, like, in this country, it's its own country, let alone in cannabis, so...
Yep, it's its own country, and Matt is right. We ended up at Gold Flora building our own supply chain, so we are literally seed to sale. I think there are a few companies that are seed to sale, so we do it all. We cultivate, manufacture, distribute. We've got our own footprint of retail stores, and we have brands. And I think the branding side of California cannabis is going to be very strong. People talk about that. We've got very strong brands, sophisticated consumers. And I see that for us to expand, hitting 66% adjusted gross margins in our market, very difficult. We've been able to accomplish that. We feel if we can do that in California, we can essentially take that same business model, move it to other states, perhaps other countries, and take the brands with us and be successful. And for us, it all starts with the seed, and it all starts with flower.
Yeah, and it also, the global growth of cannabis is ultimately everything you've believed in California. So, I mean, it just does seem to be that these headlines, even for a company that's so focused within the biggest cannabis market, are exciting. Darren, you know, we're in a state that's also going to have some exciting news for their cannabis market as we get to the ballot in November next year for Florida. You have a very major presence here at a brand that I think is well known. But again, you're a company that's had a vision of, from my perspective, owning assets, developing assets in places that make sense. So what makes sense for you as you look at the world and you think about the places that have been, I think, first of all, where you've been successful in the U.S. at Verano, and obviously the news that we're talking about in Germany.
Yeah, Tim, so thank you. A couple of things. First of all, even for those folks who are focused on the U.S., which Verano has certainly been as part of our strategy, we are part of a global supply chain. As you said, the world is interconnected. We buy products from China. We get grow supplies from the Netherlands. We are part of this global supply chain, and the ancillary impacts of that global supply chain are pretty phenomenal. In Florida alone, we're looking at a market that over the next couple of years is going to be close to $3 billion with growth potential beyond that. We're an industry that employs 500,000 people in the United States, about the same as the airline industry, far more than beverage and beverage and tobacco manufacturing in the United States. $100 billion worldwide over the next 6 years. So as we think about places to allocate capital, as we think about opportunities, we take a look at what we've learned. I've been in the industry since 2014, 2015. I know many in the room have been in here in the industry for quite some time as well. We've seen lots of changes. We've had lots of frustrations as well, though, just in terms of the business model that we've been forced into. One of the things that I think is so unique, and Matt sort of spoke to this, about global cannabis is the opportunity for multiple points of entry. You can leverage intellectual property that you've built and developed in the United States as it relates to grow methodologies, as it relates to branding, as it relates to distribution and retail. And you could do it in a way that's more specialized because you're not subject to the same constraints, tax, banking, et cetera. So we are very much, as a company and as an industry, focused on these international markets to really find ways to extract additional value from the expertise that we've built over time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I guess, Constantine, I'd ask, how do you view your strengths within the European market? Because again, some of the strengths in Europe may be about navigating the regulatory environment and navigating some of the, I think, the infrastructure dynamics. And, on some level asset heavy, but at the same time, again, the view towards brands, everyone is always talking about the brand they have and the brand the market perceives. And where do you think you've really, and Demacan has carved out their niche?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot about brands today and before whenever I was in the US, and maybe the US is more brands focused because the whole cannabis industry is more recreational focused. I don't think brands matter to that an extent in Germany and Europe. We really look at and interact with the customer/patient, and we see that they are looking for certain strains. And I cannot tell you exactly which strains will be successful,
right,
but we see it. We have probably 12, 14 strains in our portfolio. 2, 3 are just amazing. They sell so well. 2, 3 are poor sellers, and has not much to do with the THC potency. So my advice number one is you need to have boots on the ground, get the regulatory right. I think you have to have an asset in Germany or in Europe, and then get to know the customer and get to know the patient and try to find out what they really like and educate them on how important it is to pick the right strain for their need and for what they want.
And that's fascinating because, Lori, when I think about California, I think about a place that is so sophisticated in terms of the strains and terpene formats. And is what you recognize Constantine's market is California, just another planet. Seriously, I mean, because again, the brands on some level maybe are almost too sophisticated for the market they're in. And I say that because, again, I understand cannabis in California to really be, call it ground zero, but a place where, frankly, some of the best brands have never survived and thrived.
Yeah.
And, on some level, this is what this is all about.
Yeah. So, the California culture is a real deal. It's like starting a surfboard company. It's a lot of similarities. It's all on the coast. You can surf there.
Hold on.
It's
surfboard company.
Surfboard, just surfing and weed and the whole culture and the music, it's a thing. But I can tell you, just as an example, like the cake strains were a thing a year, 2 years ago. If you're not growing candy today, you're just already out of the market.
Right.
We move that fast. So you have to be on top of those trends. And because we have 17 retail stores, we collect that data and we try to get there. And it's why some of the boutique guys who grow in smaller grows, they found success because they're ahead of those trends. We're pretty big, so it takes us a little bit longer to get there. But you have to be following those trends, and our consumers are very, very picky. So they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they do. And again, I kind of, as someone that lives in New York and have watched a market with so much potential fall over itself, basically brands are created in California, but somehow they're made in New York. So, and I mean, kind of taken to the next level, although somehow they're found in New York, and that's another issue altogether. Matt, again, because Curaleaf, I think, has been globally focused really from even early days. Talk about the rest of the world. I mean, you obviously have plenty of work ahead of you in Germany. You certainly have, I think, if anything, over the last 3 or 4 years, decided the markets in the U.S. where you wanted to really, be focused and maybe, right-size markets that you didn't want to be as focused on. How about Latin America? And let's be clear. I mean, Israel, some would argue, is the most interesting, is the most sophisticated scientific market, or at least has certainly possibly the most history in terms of the science side of the plant and some of the data and some of the medical side of it.
Yeah, so look, I think over the next number of years, you're going to see development all over the world. A lot further than it is today. Places like Asia, Latin America. Today our focus has certainly been on Europe. We see between Germany and the UK, two massive opportunities and a lot of runway there. We've talked about additional expansion we've made into other countries within Europe that have been a lot less talked about. Places like Poland, for an example, where you're seeing a lot of development, and Czech and more countries of that variety. So, that's been our, I would say, primary area of focus. But I do think looking out the next few years, Australia is a market that people don't talk about much, but has been really growing at a fast pace. Same thing as New Zealand. So when we talk about truly across the entire globe, that's what we're seeing take place.
So Darren, this is a U.S. panel. This is a global panel, but we're sitting here in the U.S. and at times, U.S. investors have been almost overly righteous that what the U.S. is the biggest market by far. Why are we even entertaining other markets? And investors at times, I think, have been. I would just say that there has been a misrepresentation about what the opportunity was globally vis-a-vis the U.S. market. So again, bring this back. There's nothing wrong with pounding your table and saying, whether it's California, or whether it's Florida, or whether it's Illinois, or whether it's New Jersey, or that New York market that really needs to finally turn the corner. We all recognize it's a global economy, but this is 20% of my focus.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, as we look at the European markets in particular, we're seeing compound annual growth rates equivalent to what we saw in the United States back in the 2017 period. If you look at the way that the markets are developing now, yes, they're early stage. Yes, the ramp is slow, just vis-a-vis the United States in terms of absolute dollars. But it really is the U.S. about 7 or 8 years ago. Not to say that it's the same, not to say that it's going to grow in the same way and the players will be the same or be able to leverage the same learnings that they had in the United States. But I think it's something that you ignore at your peril. I think if you're looking for those growth drivers beyond new medical markets and medical markets turning into adult use markets in the United States, which will happen inevitably, and it was the DEA that called me earlier, so that's why I had to left my phone on.
I knew that you were getting the first call, Darren. Yeah.
But obviously we're all, I would imagine we're all quite bullish on those changes at the federal level here. But the truth is that as we expand across the United States, as we see more markets turn on, as we have an opportunity to participate in really turning cannabis into more of a ubiquitous product in the United States, we see what's happening with this respect to these consumer preference changes, and there's no reason to believe that Europe is going to be any different. What Germany has done, obviously, is monumental in really beating us to the punch as it comes to rescheduling, taking this off a list of narcotics, improving access for patients, lessening some of the constraints around storage and transportation. We're going to see this continue to fall. We're going to see dominoes continue to fall, and that those growth rates continue. So yes, it's a slower ramp. Yes, you're going to have perhaps higher ROI short term in the United States, but there is a limitation to what you can provide or what you can do in any particular market, and you really have to have in this day and age a global outlook. Again, I think companies ignore it at their peril.
Konstantin, how do you think about partners outside of not only Germany and Europe, but possibly in the U.S.? What are your criteria? And again, possibly it's not necessarily looking for big vertically integrated companies, but possibly companies that are very well positioned in ancillary services and in places that I think are going to be very complementary to what you're already doing in Europe, but need that U.S. partner.
Yeah, so we are working together already with some companies in the US and in Canada, and not only importing their flower, but also like looking for good genetics, good strains. That's really key, and we've just sealed a deal with one company there, and I think it would be very interesting to bring in more product like that. I think we really want to learn from US companies, all the larger MSOs that we've spoken to in the last 5-6 years. I think there's a lot to learn. I think Germany has done a couple of things better than the US, but still, I don't want to make every single mistake that maybe Darren and others have done in the past. So it would be great to just learn from them where to focus, what to do, and what not to do. Right now, there's so many opportunities on the table, from like developing your own tissue culture lab and to the brands. It's a fantastic playground. We've reached a tipping point as of April 1st, and now it's really the question on where to focus and how to capitalize.
Is there any turning back in Europe right now? Because, I've seen comments from the CDU that if they are elected into power, obviously they are diametrically opposed. So
I don't think at all. I believe in the tipping point model. I think cannabis is a highly regulated market that can reach a tipping point or not. Once you have legalized, I've never seen any market that has really rolled back legalization. And it's just a baby step that Germany has done, but it's this critical baby step in that right direction. So no, I think we're now waiting for a second pillar of legalization, where we'll have real commercial pilot projects, model regions, where we see a full-on legalization, and then we're looking at the European development. So no, I think no turning back. It's forward is the way.
It's a turn of events in 6 months that I think very few would have expected. Lori, I did kind of jokingly touch on the international market outside of California, that is the rest of the United States for California brands. Talk about that. However you want to attack this. First of all, the illicit market is a big problem for everybody up here on this stage. Call it a philosophical dynamic, because on some level, setting people free to regulate themselves and states free to regulate themselves and states allowing people to grow their own, and there's a bit of irony here, but some of the best California brands are in bodegas around the corner from my apartment in New York City. Are you happy about that?
I'm happy that the growers in California are able to move all their product out of the state. Frees up my market. That's true. But I would say this, our competition right now, without really getting into it, in California, our revenue is down at the retail stores by about 6 or 7%. That is because of hemp. So D8, D9, and the products being sold in the smoke shops, which it's obviously not legal in California. And then I think, as everybody knows, being able to order products online through the mail, we've received those multiple packages. We've tested them all. They all test hot, above 25% THC. So I think closing that farm loophole, a lot of people, probably not popular opinion, but for us in California, we would like to see all the hemp product go through the regulated stores and through a metric tag.
Darren, when I think about, Darren Weiss, not Matt Darren. This is, I start looking at the card here and I get confused. But actually, I want you both to address this. But I'll start with Darren Weiss. The concept of where U.S. companies are able to develop different segments that may have more success internationally than they might have here, or what we've seen is certain parts of the country, certainly certain segments sell better in certain places. Do you have any view on that, on the product line that could be part of a global strategy, or do you think it really is going to be like it is here? It's going to come down to flower, and we're letting the segments kind of evolve as they do.
Yeah, so look, flower I think is always going to dominate in any particular market, whether it be internationally or in the United States. Flower is king. You know, people have been talking as long as I've been in the industry at how, you know, processed products, vape are going to take over the flower industry. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. That being said, for reasons that have a lot to do with the economics of U.S. cannabis, the companies like ours have had to really try to be everything to everyone. We manufacture in every category. We, you know, we meet the consumer at every price point. There hasn't really been a tremendous amount of differentiation from a product perspective. Europe and the rest of the world markets really provide an opportunity to be able to leverage those learnings, to be able to focus on a particular category, to be able to, you know, put more innovation dollars into the ground, into labs, et cetera. And so as we think about our competitive advantage in the United States, whether it be scale, whether it be a particular category, whether it be brand development, et cetera, we really have an opportunity, and not just Verano, this really goes for everyone on stage and folks out in the audience who are plant touching. We really have an opportunity to take what differentiates us in the United States and to really play with it a little more than we can, you know, in the United States, just given the economics of the model.
Yeah. Matt, yeah, your thoughts?
Look, I think, you know, the form factors are relatively well established at this point, other than perhaps beverages, which is a category that you can debate how big it'll be, but it's certainly going to be a lot bigger than it is today. You know, I think a lot of the innovation that we're seeing and you're going to continue to see is a lot greater depth within the form factors, whether it's minor cannabinoid products, whether it's a lot of new science with genetics and some of the things going on in that space. And so I think there's a lot more opportunity, and that's where you're going to see, you know, a lot of the development take place. I'll go back to your other question on the New York, California pipeline, and would just add as well, I think, you know, for the entire industry, no matter what side of the fence you're sitting on, it's really about having a level playing field and actually enforcing regulations that are in place, whether you're talking about New York or hemp or any of the different you know, topics here. Just a level playing field where things are regulated, they are above board. You know, this shadow economy that's been you know, created through all this is hurting many people, you know, as part of the entire industry, not just big companies, entrepreneurs, and everybody in between. And so I do think you know, that's something that has to get dealt with.
No, and I would echo this every single time I talk about the industry, whether I'm talking about it publicly or whether, you know, panels like this. This is an industry that plays by the rules and wants to play by the rules. And so, you know, it just so happens, you talk about enforcement, you know, in New York, there's no enforcement of anything. And I mean, as a guy that lives, again, in New York, you can get run over by a messenger guy on a Harley on a sidewalk, and there's no cops anywhere. But I, you know, and so what's going on in cannabis is particularly frustrating too, because again, part of what this is all about globally is institutionalizing and regulating an industry that we know has been living outside of the boundaries forever. And so as we summarize, we've got a couple minutes left here, so I'd love each panelist to kind of, I'm sure there's some element of the global economy of cannabis we probably haven't gotten to or you'd like to emphasize, because again, everybody walked into this conference understanding that this was a global industry, and it was a global industry for people in the U.S. that maybe, you know, Canada caught their attention, but the reality is we've been, whether it's Australia or Israel or Europe or Latin America, frankly, which may have one of the most interesting consumer cultures for cannabis as any place in the world. So quickly, everyone, just a couple last thoughts.
Well, listen, Tim, I just want to encourage everyone to look beyond the U.S., look beyond what Boris called the fortress of the U.S. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, and I would encourage you to look at Germany. Europe is a bigger thing, but again, Europe is like regulated differently state by state, country by country. Germany is one country with 84 million people. That's a huge opportunity. Our medical cannabis market size is about 200 million. If you compare that to Florida, as Boris Johnson did, that was at 2 billion, right, with 1/4 of the population. So I know we speak a funny language. We have unpronounceable long last names, but come visit, figure out the way, and it would be great to work with you, because we definitely want to have people from the U.S. in Germany.
Thank you. Matt.
Yeah, I think to echo, those comments. I think today the European market is a couple percent of the U.S. market in terms of size of the overall market. Yet the population and the addressable market is larger than the U.S. So think about that and what the growth opportunity is. I would also say, just like the U.S., where you have different cannabis cultures, whether you're in California, New York, or Chicago, it's similar in Europe. And I think it's kind of cool to be able to go travel to Germany, travel to Spain, UK, and you have very different cannabis cultures, yet kind of go across the world, and you're finding more and more believers in cannabis legalization, the medicinal benefits of cannabis, the social elements of it. And so I think it's really fascinating, the worldwide phenomenon that it is.
And it's good of you to be an ambassador of that, Matt. Lori, your thoughts here, sitting in the biggest cannabis market in the world.
Yeah. Well, we're already global because our seeds come from Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq and Morocco. So we spread the wealth and love. But no, we've been contacted, Gold Flora, to speak to a few different countries in Europe and actually in the Middle East about a medical program. And I think that's positive progress, right? If those countries are just looking at even having the conversation, I think it's a long way away. But we're totally open to any opportunity that we have in other markets.
And again, like California wine is loved in the south of France, so is California cannabis.
Yeah, and actually on that point, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity in the United States. There aren't many exports that we have as a nation that we manufacture in this country. Cannabis is a made in America industry. We make the product here, we design the product here, and we have cannabis cultures that frankly, have international exposure as well. And cachet. So I think we have an incredible opportunity as a country, given these demographic changes, given these societal changes. Folks see cannabis as a healthy alternative to tobacco, to alcohol. That's just going to continue. I think Germany is, definitely one of the first dominoes to fall, and hopefully we see the U.S. change course soon. But we take a lot of pride in the fact that we've been part of this movement in the United States, and we're looking forward to being part of this movement worldwide.
Yeah, and in closing, this really is the next great American industry where American culture is going to be exported in a way that I think will be suitable to the product that's created here. So let's give it up for a great panel. Cannabis in the global economy. Thank you all. Thank you, Benzinga.